Hello again and welcome to Lessons from Scenes. So today, the lesson we're going to be looking at is called Don't Forget or Regret to Say Goodbye. Now this film we're going to be looking at the lesson from is called Mississippi Masala. Now this film was released in 1991. So the plot of the film is that it's based on a love story between Mina, a young Indian girl who comes to Mississippi after her and her family fled from Uganda 12 years before, after the expulsion of the Asians in the 1970s under Idi Amin's rule in Uganda. She ends up falling in love with a carpet cleaner business owner, Demetrius, who is Denzel's character in this film. So that's the plot of the story. I'd say, look, very good film. I think it's quite an underrated film, but this was released back in 91. But like I said, if anybody ever gets the chance, you should watch it. If you haven't seen it, give it a try. But funny enough, the lesson is not actually from the love story in this film, but it's more from the friendship, which I think is just as important as the love story between Jay, which is Mina's father in the film, and Okilo. So we're going to look at some scenes to understand the dynamics between the two and also why the lesson is so important. But what we'll do in the first scene that I'm going to show, Jay gets into some trouble and Okilo comes to help him out. But I won't say too much just because I want people to catch the scene. So we'll see how it goes and we'll play the first scene.
If I release him, they'll get my neck.
Well, what I'm trying to tell you is
He gave an interview, this brother of yours, on BBC for the world to hear.
well,
That Amin was evil.
You. Out. You can go. Come on, let's go.
You gave an interview on BBC, said that Amin was evil. Are you mad? What about Kino? What about Mina? Do you ever think of them?
What should I have done? Remain silent? That is the coward's way.
Don't talk to me about cowards. That's what you are. You're not leaving because you're scared to leave. You are scared of leaving Uganda.
Why should I go? Why should I go? Okello, this is my home.
Not anymore, Jay. Africa is for Africans. Black Africans.
So we can see from that scene that Jay has been taken away. And this was around the time that Ugandans were having issues with the Asians in the country. So because of this, he spoke out, and this is eventually what actually landed him in jail. But we can see that his friend Okilo comes to help him out. He actually pleads with the officer, and eventually he actually has to bribe the officer into letting him go. So then we obviously see the dynamic between the two of them when they're talking. You know, Okilo's looking at him saying, "Are you crazy to speak out against the Idi Amin like that, the president of Uganda at that time?" But Jay is defiant. He says, "No, I was just sticking up for myself. It's the coward's way." But then, as they keep talking, we know that Okilo delivers the words that really hurt Jay when he says Africa is for black Africans, and we know that hurt Jay a lot. But what we'll do is we're going to now look at another scene where this is actually the last time where Jay and Okilo meet before Jay eventually has to leave because the Asians are being expelled from Uganda.
Kino.
kaka.
Asante sana. Ah, Mina, come. Hii nini? Unaenda na hii?
Huwezi kuja na sisi?
La, siwezi. Lakini nataka uwe mtoto mzuri. Chunga wazazi wako. Na hapana sawa Kiswahili, eh?
Lakini tazungumza na nani huko?
Lazima utapata mtu. Utapata mtu. Sawa. Okay. Tutaonana hivi karibuni, eh? Sawa. Okay.
Kile chachu?
Asante. Asante sana.
So we see here in the second scene, Akilo has come to say goodbye to Jay and the family. And first of all, we see that he says goodbye to Jay's wife, Kinu. And then later on, then we see Mina, when she was a young child. We see then he says goodbye to her. Now, we can see the interaction between Akilo and Mina. It really shows you the love that Akilo has for the family, or for Jay's family. You know, essentially it's his family too. And you know, and they're leaving. But what is so strong in this scene is that after you see the goodbyes between Mina and Akilo, Jay just walks right past his friend, right past Akilo. Now, of course, he's still angry at what Akilo has said, but the fact that he just walked right past him without saying anything, and as you can see Akilo's face there, you can see that crushed him. But you know, that's not even the saddest point of this scene. It's when he's going to the bus and you see him now, Mina wave at him and he now waves back. You can see it in his face. He's completely devastated. He's completely crushed. You know, and this is the last time he's going to see his friend, and Jay doesn't even look at him. But we'll come later to see how significant that is. But if you can see Akilo's face, that was serious. That was probably a very powerful scene. Very powerful scene. Now in this scene, we're a lot more further into the film, but we can of course see now Jay and Mina are a lot older. But now what we see is that in this scene here is that Jay is now reflecting back on what Akilo said, and he's now speaking to Mina.
After 34 years, my brother Okelo told me, Africa is for Africans, black Africans. After 34 years, that's what it all came down to. The color of my skin. That's why we left. Not because of Idi Amin or anything like that. Mina, believe me, I'm speaking from experience. People stick to their own kind. You're forced to accept that when you grow older. I'm only trying to spare you the pain.
Okello risked his life to save yours. I don't know what more proof you could have of his love.
What do you remember? You were just a child.
I remember. I remember his face when he came to say goodbye, and you wouldn't even look at him.
So in this scene here, we see Jay now reflecting on what Akilo had said to him, you know, and how he referred to him as his brother, and what he had said, you know, from that previous scene. And we see how much it affected him, because of course now he's a lot older. So we see that that's something he never forgot, and I think that pain still stood with him even as I'm showing you this scene now, is a lot further into the film. And basically he's just advising Mina, but of course Mina comes and says, no, you know, do you forget what he done for you, and that, you know, he proved his love for you, you know. And of course we see that Jay tried to almost dismiss it, like, oh, what do you remember, you was a child. But we see that even we saw in that scene, that second scene, you know, when she was young and the way he waved and waved back, she told him straight that, you know, you didn't even look at him. And I think that's when, in this scene, that's where it really drops for Jay. I think that's where Jay really know. I think he had already been feeling it, but I think when his daughter, when Mina said that to him, he knew he had nowhere to escape, you know. Those feelings that regret you can see on his face. But so now in the next scene, we see that now Jay has now actually gone back to Uganda. I won't say why he's gone to Uganda, just so you guys can watch the film, but he goes back to Uganda. So we see in this scene where he now visits the school where Okilo used to work.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm looking for Okelo. Okelo Omoro. He used to teach here.
Okelo? Okelo died many years ago in Amin's time. Around 72, I remember. Because of all the troubles, the Asian teachers didn't come to school. And Okelo, one day, didn't turn up.
How did he die?
Disappeared one day. They found his body. Were you his friend? I'm sorry.
So in this scene, we see how now Jay has, of course, gone back to Uganda, and then he's gone to visit the school that Okelo used to teach at. So now when he goes there, he meets the teacher who's there. He asks for Okelo, and of course the teacher remembers him from before, but unfortunately the teacher drops the news that Okelo has died, and we can see how distraught Jay is. And then of course he alluded to the fact that one day he didn't come to school, he disappeared, and they found his body. So we can only assume from that scene that he was murdered. And if you look, when they were talking, he said around 72. So it's very likely, and if just to give a little historic context, this is when I believe Asians were expelled out of Uganda. So that means that Okelo was probably ended, just to be YouTube friendly, literally probably right after Jay had gone. But we'll get more into the lessons at the end. So now in this scene, we see that Jay is now reflecting on everything that has happened since he heard of Okilo's passing, and he's actually writing a letter to Kinu, but we'll get into it.
There is so little love in the world, and yet so much. Mina was right. I never said goodbye to him. Now he's dead, Kinu.
So guys, here we can see now from the last scene how now Jay is now reflecting back. You know, once he found out Okilo had passed away, you can see now that all the regret, all the feelings have come back. And you know, he just, as he mentioned in that last sentence there, that he wished he'd said goodbye, and that what Mina had said to him, he realized that she was right. You know, and that's the face there of regret, when you now reflect back and you look back and you realize you can't undo what you did before. But I think it's a very good segue into where I feel we can take the lessons. That's why I call the lessons never forget to say goodbye, because this scene sums it all up here. You know, that if he could have gone back, he probably would have looked at things different. Though he was angry at the time, but he would have addressed things completely different. Though the main lesson is never regret to say goodbye, I'm going to just go over a few points into what I think happened when we just go over a recap. So, you know, I think the first thing was, I think when Jay felt upset at that time, I think he definitely should have told Okilo how he felt then. You know, of course, look, what Okilo said wasn't right, and you know, a friend that you've grew up with, and you know, to say something like that was not cool. You know, that they've been together from since they were youngsters, and for him to say something like that, of course, would have been very hurtful. But I think, just looking at the lesson, I think Jay could have said something. He could have said, look, yo, you know, I don't like what you've said to me. You know, you've deeply hurt me, but I understand sometimes men, we don't like to share our feelings or emotions for fear that we will be chastised, you know, in front of anybody, whether it be a man or a woman. But it's more so his friend. I think he could have opened up to him at that point. And, you know, when we saw he held that anger in, and unfortunately, that's what overspilt to the last time he actually saw his friend. And we saw that scene there, and we saw how he couldn't even look at him because he was so angry. You know, and I think that was just one point. And I think a second point as well is that I think because of how he felt, which was of course natural, he forgot that essentially that he would have actually risked his life staying in Uganda. You see, I added a little bit of a historical context with it. You see, what he done, you know, calling out the president of Uganda at that time, especially in that political climate where the Asians were having the issues with the Ugandans and so on and so forth, there's no way he could have stayed. You see, there's no way he would have stayed, because if he had stayed, it's very likely what had eventually happened to Okilo would have very likely happened to Jay. Very likely. So I don't think he really grasped the concept of what Okilo had done for him. But Okilo essentially saved his life, you know, and that there's just no way he could stay. You know, I think another good point as well is that we know what Okilo said, no doubt, was wrong. You know, it was very bad. I always say it was very terrible, but it wasn't unfixable. You know what I mean? And this is where our emotions in life, this is where our emotions can when it gets the better of us, sometimes we don't think. I think when we now go to the scene when he was with Mina, I think at that time he probably came to his realization and like, you know what did I do? So, you know, it was such an unfortunate thing, and I think it was very interesting to see that dynamic in the film. You know, but again, like I said, the main reason why I've said that lesson is never forget to say goodbye. You know, this life is not promised, man. This life is not promised. And I think in the scenes we saw there, you know, when he didn't say goodbye to his friend, he never knew that was going to be the last time he would see his friend. You know, he never knew, you know. And like I said, it's funny, time, you know, when you give things time and you reflect over things and, you know, you mature and so on and so forth, you can look at things a bit different. And I think that's what Jay was able to do. So for me, I think it was a very good lesson, man. Like it's one I looked at and I thought, wow, because so much on the film is focused, of course, on the love story between Denzel's character. But I think this is something that I think in the film that gets overlooked. So I just thought this is something that I would do. It's a lesson I saw, you know. But yeah, like I said, look, this is lessons from scenes. I'm going to try to do more of these on different types of films and so on and so forth. I'm just going to keep trying to grow the channel and trying to do as many as I can. You know, and look, thank you for your time. If you'd like to like or subscribe, that'd be fantastic. And peace.